Pierre. We found a young beluga stranded on the shore. It's very small, around 1.5 meters long. At that length, it could be premature. Judging by the tide, it's only been stranded a few hours.
At last it's arrived. This young St. Lawrence beluga was brought here from Big Beach near Rimouski, over 500 kilometers away. It's only 1.4 meters long, right at the limit of normal. In fact, it's smaller than normal. It can't be very old. If we hadn't intervened, this infant beluga would have died. Even now, we don't know if it'll survive. And we must find out what kind of care it needs, whether it's sick or healthy. It's unusual for the mother to have abandoned her calf. A female beluga has been known to hold her baby at the surface when it was already dead. Perhaps the mother died giving birth. The belugas of the St. Lawrence are plagued with serious health problems. Although protected since 1979, the population is not increasing. Only a few hundred remain in the St. Lawrence. This calf, like all those born this year, represents the future of the population. At the turn of the century, the beluga population was decimated by intensive commercial hunting. It was further reduced by cod and salmon fishermen who wrongly believed the species was responsible for the drop in fish stocks. Today, the most frequent cause of death in belugas is the high concentration of toxic substances in their bodies. The more time we spend with this beluga, the more we realize how little we know about the species. Fortunately, we have the experience of a similar rescue attempt last year. On the morning of August 21st, 1991, we received a call from the captain of a tugboat. A young beluga in distress had adopted his boat and, since the previous day, had been swimming beside the boat's hull where it was moored.
We've had the beluga under observation for 2 hours now. No other animal has been sighted in the area. It looks like the young whale has been abandoned.
At 9:30 a.m., the team decides to rescue the beluga and give it one last chance to live. This attempt is a world premiere and a tremendous challenge. For belugas in captivity, especially newborns, the chances of survival are slim. The expertise of institutions and aquariums across North America is immediately put to use. We must act quickly to find a suitable basin and determine what treatment is needed.
2 p.m. We give the young beluga a solution of electrolytes and glucose to which antibiotics have been added.
The young calf risks infection, hypoglycemia, or hypothermia. Any of these conditions could be fatal.
water in the bay is extremely cold. The calf is barely moving. We decide to temporarily remove it from the water.
What's extraordinary about this situation is that we have a chance to learn things that we haven't been able to learn in 10 years studying carcasses and whales in their natural environment. The calf still has its umbilical cord, so it must be very young, as the cord usually falls off between 10 and 14 days after birth. Normally, the young are born at the beginning of summer, so this one was quite late. It's also unusual for the calf to be found so far downstream, because mothers and their offspring normally dwell over 80 kilometers further upstream. Saving an animal in distress is a daunting task, and returning it to its natural environment is just as complicated, especially in the case of a social animal like the beluga. By taking the whale into an adoption basin, we're accepting a heavy responsibility. But do we have any choice? Leaving a small calf to fend for itself would mean certain death. We believe it's worth it. Curiosity and our desire to learn get the better of our fear of failure. Since its arrival in the aquarium, the new boarder has been under constant surveillance. Every morning, the team takes the beluga's pulse and temperature, does blood tests, and inspects its wounds. Special attention is paid to the rhythm of its breathing. Any increase could signal a pulmonary infection, the most common disease among young cetaceans.
We just received the results of the first blood tests. The concentrations of gamma globulins in the blood were very low. This means the calf probably never received any colostrum. It must never have had any milk from its mother. Our attempts to bottle feed the infant beluga have failed completely. We decide to continue force feeding. It's the only way to ensure that the calf receives enough food and antibiotics at each meal.
Belugas live in groups, and the species has a complex social organization. In its natural environment, the young calf would have been in constant contact with its mother and probably other members of the herd.
We've devised a routine of play with the young beluga, following an irregular schedule. One member of the team swims alongside the beluga or just stays near it in the basin. At times it seems interested by our presence, at times indifferent. Of course, we cannot claim to compensate for the absence of the mother or other belugas, but I do believe these routines and contacts play an important role. The young beluga is becoming less and less active. Over the past few days, we've noticed that it swims on its side increasingly often. During play sessions, Bob responds less and less to our stimulation and touch. On August 30th in the afternoon, after a period of shaking that lasted over an hour, the young beluga died. The cause of death remains unknown.
The autopsy revealed severe neonatal atelectasis. The calf could only breathe through 2% of its left lung and 10% of its right lung. Because its condition made exertion difficult, the calf became gradually weaker. The only possible outcome was death. Despite last year's experience, there are many unpredictable elements in this new case. Other than the vital signs and blood tests, we have little in the way of usable data. Analysis of the fatty tissue revealed very high levels of Mirex, DDT, and PCBs. The calf must have received toxic substances from its mother before birth. The other main source of toxic substances in young belugas is via the mother's milk. The substances are dissolved in fat, a main component of the milk. Belugas suckle their young for 1 to 2 years, so the calf, when weaned, may have a higher level of contamination than its own mother. We have adjusted the composition, volume, and frequency of meals based on last year's experience. We're trying to come as close as possible to the mother's milk, but of course minus the toxic substances the calf would have received in its natural environment. Can we learn more about the problems of the St. Lawrence belugas from this young individual? Although contamination levels have diminished in recent years, we are paying the price of over 50 years of negligence. Toxic substances have accumulated in many species of fish, crustaceans, and invertebrates that compose the beluga's diet. It's hard to know if our attempts to save these young calves can change anything for the belugas of the St. Lawrence. We do believe that a rescue can help us acquire precious new knowledge about belugas. But are not the efforts invested out of proportion with the result? Are we acting out of soft-heartedness or in a necessary and fully justified manner? Should we persist even if most of the rescue attempts end in failure? Over and above these considerations, we must ask ourselves if we can afford to abandon even a single member of an endangered population, especially when the endangerment is the result of our own society's neglect. Despite our efforts, the second beluga died. The autopsy showed a congenital malformation of the larynx that allowed water and milk to enter its lungs.